What's going on, my anime and manga nerds? Welcome back to Calvary's Cave. Today, we are jumping right back into the Conviction arc, and holy crap! I'll be honest, I wasn't ready for how extreme the finale of this arc turned out to be. In my last video, I mentioned that I wasn't really feeling the whole mock eclipse idea, but I also said that I would shut up and just let Miura cook. Well, after finishing this volume, I can confidently say that I have been well fed. The way that everything built up and came together at the end was way more intense than I was expecting. It really caught me off guard in the best way possible. So today, we are covering Deluxe Edition Volume 7, and this is when Guts finally shows up to the city of Albion, and it goes all the way over into that powerful ending at the Tower of Conviction. And stick around, because there is a lot to talk about. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos on the Berserk manga, feel free to hit the link and check it out. But without any further ado, let's just get into it. First off, call me crazy, but there's something that's been sitting in the back of my mind, and I gotta get it off of my chest. In the last video, I brought up how Guts could have totally hitched a ride with the Skeleton Knight when he showed up, and honestly, I still stand by it. I firmly believe that if he had jumped on and ridden with him, the Godhand would have never been able to push their plan forward the way that they did. The entire climax of this arc probably never would have happened, and it's one of those little what-if moments that keeps nagging at the back of my head. I kept thinking one small change like that could have thrown everything off course. Anyway, I know that it sounds kind of wild, but I'm gonna dive deeper into why I feel this way, and I'm gonna cover it later on in this video. So stick around if you want to hear me ramble about it. As soon as I crack open this book, Guts has already made it to Albion, and he's actively searching for Casca, but he's literally minutes too late. My least favorite character in the entire Conviction arc takes it upon herself to snatch Casca away because she's terrified of dying, and right away this ties straight back to that point I made in the last video. Plotline that does not get fulfilled, part 1. Casca gets taken out of Albion, which means the mock eclipse they were building toward simply doesn't happen. But because of the plot, we're gonna roll with it for now. One thing that I mentioned in the last video was Isidro, the kid who started following Guts around. Well, in this volume, he really steps up and becomes a proper main character. And I have to say, Miura did a fantastic job with him. What I love most is how well he bounces off of Puck. The two of them together are comedy gold. Their back and forth is effortless, super funny, and it gives the story these perfect little breathers right when things are getting heavy. Isidro's over-the-top confidence mixed with Puck's sarcasm creates some genuinely top-tier comedic moments. Even though he's still just a kid trying to keep up with Guts, you can already see him growing, and he's not just there for laughs either. He brings a lot of heart and determination to the group. Miura managed to make him feel useful without taking away from how small and inexperienced he is, and that balance is really well done. Honestly, Isidro quickly became one of the highlights in this volume for me. The humor that he brings is spot on, and it never feels forced. What I really appreciate about Isidro in this volume is that he could have easily become a liability. He's still just a kid, his execution is often imperfect, and yeah, he messes up sometimes, but the cool thing is, he actually pulls his weight when it counts. There are several moments where things could have really gone bad for the group, and a lot of the characters probably wouldn't have made it out without him being there. He steps up in ways that actually matter. I especially like that Miura didn't turn him into a constant damsel in distress. Instead of always needing to be rescued, Isidro gets chances to contribute and show some real grit. It makes him feel way more earned as a character instead of just dead weight tagging along. The comedy beats with Isidro are absolutely worth it. Isidro really shows how crafty he is in this volume as well. He's actually one of the ones who sees where Casca is being taken, and he's the entire reason that Guts even makes it to the Heretic's hideout in time to rescue her. While all that's happening, he tells Puck to run off and get Guts' attention, and then he stands behind to hold his ground against the Heretics. This whole sequence is honestly one of the funniest moments in the entire book for me. At first, I thought that the kid was way over his head, but nope, he is simply built different. And I didn't expect that throwing rocks would be all that effective, but he's out here chucking boulders and somehow keeping the Heretics at bay. Later, he even holds back the monsters the same way. And the best part is, he does all of it in this over-the-top comedic style, yet he's genuinely pulling his weight. And while he's doing it, he's dropping some of the funniest bars and one-liners the entire time. I just couldn't get enough of it. The whole scene had me laughing while still being impressed. Isidro is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters in this arc. And in the last video, I mentioned that I was honestly getting pretty irritated with Farnese, Azan, and Serpico during the volume, and honestly, pretty much everyone in the entire Conviction arc does this too. They have no clue what's actually going on, but they automatically assume that Guts is the villain. It just creates all this extra tension that didn't really need to be there, and I get that Guts is a super stoic guy, and he's not the type to sit down and explain the whole situation, but man, it really could have helped clear things up a lot faster. And by the end of the arc, everyone finally starts to come to their senses and draw their own conclusions, and I'm actually really excited to see where their characters go from there. But still, I gotta say, a big chunk of this book could have been resolved way sooner if the Holy Iron Chain Knights weren't so stubbornly stuck on the idea that their faith was the only truth. That blind conviction really dragged out a lot of unnecessary conflict. That being said, the Holy Iron Chain Knights pull up at the worst possible moment, and they're both left fighting these hordes of possessed heretics while Isidro is still holding his ground and attempting to save both Nina and Casca. I should also mention that Joachim actually survived the huge fall from the last book, and I was genuinely surprised to see him show up again. How in the world did he make it? He's just a regular fragile human. The guy fell off of a cliff. There's zero explanation for how he survived or got back up. It's just one of those moments where you just have to accept that it's serving the plot. But because he made it, he's the whole reason that the Holy Iron Chain Knights end up interfering with Guts while he's trying to save Casca. And Joachim's survival basically kicks the whole conflict with the Knights back into gear. It felt pretty convenient, but hey, here we are. I also have to mention one of the funniest reveals in this book, and that's that the great goat that the heretics were worshipping was actually just some regular dude in a goat costume. The moment that they tried to escape and showed that it was just a regular guy, I actually laughed out loud. It was so ridiculous and perfect at the same time. And what makes it even funnier is that while this goat guy tries to sneak away during all of the chaos, he ends up running straight into whoever's been lurking in the shadows the whole time. It was such a silly but effective way to push the plot forward. This book definitely has a bunch of funny moments, but that goat costume moment was definitely the first of many that had me cracking up in this book. We also get introduced to a brand new plot point in this volume. Whoever's been lurking in the shadows in the previous book actually has the power to turn other people into these pseudo-apostles. The whole reason the goat guy bumps into him during the chaos is so he can get turned into one of these pseudo-apostles, basically forcing Guts to deal with another enemy while they're deep in the cave. And here's the part that I think is kind of funny, not super important, but still worth mentioning. Each pseudo-apostle that shows up is directly based on whatever stupid costume that the person was wearing. The goat guy turns into a goat monster, and the others follow the same ridiculous pattern. I have no idea why it works out that way, but it's actually a pretty creative way to build tension. I probably should have seen it coming from a mile away, but yeah, here we are. Okay, I gotta be real with you guys for a second. I'm starting to feel pretty uncomfortable with the amount of times that Casca is getting essayed in this story. It just happens way too often, and it's starting to get a little excessive. Now, don't get me wrong, I fully understand that Berserk is a very dark and terrible show, and that's Miura's purpose, is to show, oh, how terrible this world can be. But after a while, it kind of crosses this threshold of, oh, this is how dark the world is, to, all right, dude, we get it. And I don't think I'm alone in my sentiment either. I still love the story and I love the characters, but this is one aspect that's been bothering me more and more as I continue to read. Next up, this is around the time where Farnese really starts to lose it as a commander. She begins making these really rash decisions, and it feels like they're all based off of that one single encounter she had with Guts. I'm not even sure what she's trying to accomplish, because these choices are costing hundreds, sometimes thousands of her own men. I was really hoping that either Azan or Serpico would step up as the voice of reason, and they do try to guide her and talk some sense into her, but she just shrugs them off every time. It's honestly kind of ironic. She's developed this full-blown god complex while leading the Holy Iron Chain Knights. She thinks she's above everyone else and their advice, even when it's clearly the smarter move. It was pretty frustrating to watch, if I'm being honest. But back to the fight, Guts and the goat end up having this long, drawn-out fight that gives Isidro just enough time to sneak out the back door with Casca and Nina. And while that's going on, I need to take a second to shout out Serpico, because his battle IQ is next level. The dude immediately reads the entire situation. He understands exactly what Guts is doing, why he's there, and what his goal is. He slips through the back door, finds the exact exit Isidro used, and calmly waits for Guts with the high ground. It's such a smart, patient play. You can tell from their clash in the last book that Guts already has this major respect for him as a fighter, but in this moment, it feels even more earned. Serpico has the advantage in almost every single way when it comes to tight, restricted fighting spaces. Even though Guts gives it everything he's got, Serpico manages to make it out completely unscathed. What I love most is that even while he's using all of these clever tactics, you can clearly see in his expressions and body language that he's actually afraid of Guts. He knows he has to basically cheat just to keep up, and that mix of fear and calculated skill makes him so interesting. I really think this is setting up a cool dynamic moving forward, especially with that last little hint we get at the very end of the Conviction arc about where the story is headed. I'm genuinely genuinely excited to see what they do with Serpico's character. If he ever ends up joining Guts on the road, I think he'd instantly become my favorite character to have by Guts' side on the battlefield, besides Guts himself, of course. Y'all want to hear the next reason of why I don't like Guts not taking a ride with the Skeleton Knight? Plotline that does not get fulfilled, part 2. If Guts had gotten there just minutes earlier, literally just a few minutes, Nina would have never been captured along with Casca and dragged back into the castle in Albion. That small timing distance really changes a lot. On to my next point, and I gotta be incredibly honest, I hate Nina's character. I am pretty confident that she is the absolute worst person in this arc. A huge chunk of the plot only moves forward because she's so incredibly useless and selfish. She's so terrified of dying that she's willing to throw everyone else under the bus just to buy herself a few more hours or days, who knows how long, even though she already knows that she's dying anyway. Her decisions literally lead to the deaths of thousands of people. And what frustrates me the most is that Miura writes her as this tragic figure who can't overcome her fear, but then gives her a happy ending and just glosses over all the destruction she caused. And I can't get past that. It's so unfair. I seriously do not like her character, and I sincerely hope that she doesn't show up later in the story. I've seen more than enough of her in the Conviction arc. I don't need to see any more. There were multiple moments where I thought she was finally about to get her comeuppance, and I was actually getting excited for it, like, you caused all of this death and chaos, now it's your turn, but nope. It never happens. It's honestly really frustrating. I could not stand Nina in this arc, and I truly hope that Miura closes the book on her for good. Adding to that, I mentioned in the last video that I was really liking Luca's character, and after this volume, she's even better in my eyes. She's such a respectable and selfless person. Even though Nina is horrible and keeps making terrible decisions, Luca still overlooks all of it and is willing to risk her own life just to make sure that Nina makes it out alive. And if it weren't for Luca, Nina probably wouldn't have survived the Conviction arc at all. What makes Luca stand out even more is how unfazed she is by everything happening around her. She lives in this weird little bubble of calm. When she meets the Skeleton Knight, she just casually goes, did I die? And when he tells her no, she's like, oh, okay. So who are you? Are you Death? All while standing in the middle of a field of corpses. To me, it's hilarious and kind of wholesome at the same time. She sees the reveal of whoever's been lurking in the shadows, watches all the terror and madness that broke so many other characters, and she still doesn't even flinch. She just dives right back in without hesitation to save Nina. Even though I cannot stand Nina, it honestly makes Luca shine even brighter. She's incredibly loving and grounded in a story that's otherwise so dark and brutal. I really hope we get to see more of her in the future. She's exactly the kind of person that I would want to have around in Guts' crew. Berserk could definitely use a character like Luca to balance out all of the darkness in the series. Quick side note, Jerome isn't a main character, but he actually gets a decent amount of screen time during the climax of the Conviction arc. I saw him in the last book and I didn't think much of him at the time, but in this volume, he really steps up. He does a lot to protect the others, and I honestly appreciate him just being there. He doesn't stand out as some memorable character, but it's always nice to have someone solid and reliable like Jerome around in the background. He quietly pulls his weight when it really matters. Y'all ready for the funniest part of this arc? So earlier I mentioned that the guy lurking in the shadows can turn people into pseudo-apostles. Well, when Mosgus finally shows up and goes full force, it turns out that he was just a regular human the entire time, and that reveal completely caught me off guard. I was dead certain that when he'd finally meet Casca, he would tear off his mask and turn into a full-blown apostle, but no, that is not what happens at all. This dude is just straight up crazy. It was honestly one of the funniest reveals in the entire volume. I actually had to pause and do some research because I thought I was losing my mind, and it turns out, yeah, Mosgus was just a regular guy the whole time. A normal guy who just happened to look absolutely ridiculous with that chiseled stone face physique. They mentioned briefly in the last book that it's because of the way that he prays, and I wasn't buying it at all, but nope. That's exactly what it was. He's been a regular, extremely unhinged human this entire time, and I still can't get over how funny that was. And to add to that, I thought when these characters turned into pseudo-apostles, they would immediately become brainwashed or lose themselves, but that's not the case at all. Shortly after, we get the reveal that the person lurking in the shadows is actually the egg of the perfect world, this walking Behelit creature. I'm still not entirely sure what happened to him, but from what I understand, he came across a Behelit, made his sacrifice, and transformed into this thing with the power to grant people temporary pseudo-apostle abilities. And because of that, Mosgus and his crew get these insane powers. And since they're also extremely devoted to their faith, they turn into these over-the-top, angelic-looking versions of themselves. Each one is basically an exaggerated version of whatever costume or symbol they were wearing. One guy with a crow turns into a full bird monster, and so on. It was actually pretty entertaining to watch. We get these long, drawn-out fights with each of them, and I have no idea how Guts managed to pull through, but he does. And that said, I do feel like we spent a little too much time on these battles. Almost half of the book feels dedicated to Guts fighting these guys, and at some point it started to drag for me. I just wanted the story to move forward already. And then Mosgus transforms into this massive angelic creature. He genuinely believes he's been chosen to defeat evil, so he throws himself into the fight against the mock eclipse. What he doesn't realize is that by doing so, he's actually causing way more trouble for everyone else by constantly getting in Guts' way. But right around this time is where things start to shift for Farnese and the rest of the knights. They're finally beginning to snap out of their blind faith. They see Mosgus transform into that weird angelic creature. They witness the mock eclipse happening, and suddenly everything they've been fighting for just doesn't feel right anymore. And I'm really glad the story lets them start thinking like normal people, like, hey, maybe we've been wrong this whole time. Maybe there's something bigger going on here. In the last video, I mentioned that I was really starting to not like Farnese, but now that she's finally starting to come to her senses and start asking all of these real questions, I'm actually starting to really enjoy her character again. And by the end of this arc, I'm really excited to see what happens to her character moving forward. And the same goes for Azan and Serpico. It's nice to watch all three of them slowly wake up from their religious fog they've been stuck in. But after all of those long drawn-out fight sequences, Mosgus and his entire crew are finally defeated, and we finally get to the grand conclusion of the Conviction arc. I have to say, I was not ready for it at all. It's easily one of the craziest plot twists that I've read in all of manga. Towards the end, it almost feels like an Avengers level event. All of the characters who have survived up until this point finally come together, and my favorites, Azan and Serpico, finally join the fray to help protect Guts against the Kushan warriors that suddenly show up. Oh, and I forgot to mention this in my last video, but Silet actually shows up again. We haven't seen him since way back in Volume 3, but it actually turns out that he was the leader of the Bakiraka? But they were sent here because an oracle sent them to find a certain person, and we eventually learned exactly who that was. Every time I flipped the page, I was just going, oh! It was so exciting watching everything come together. All of my favorite characters finally standing on the same side, fighting against the world and the forces of evil. It was such a cool way to wrap up the arc. Here comes the craziest plot twist and the conclusion of the Conviction arc. Guts and Casca's son ultimately gets defeated while trying to protect his mother. The egg of the perfect world swallows him, and that single moment becomes the catalyst for Griffith to use their child as a vessel. He reincarnates back into the human world in a new physical body. The entire mock eclipse was all building up to this, bringing Griffith back as a human once again. Holy crap, I didn't see it coming at all. And that means that Casca and Guts lost their son. Their son has essentially been absorbed into Griffith, or I don't even know what happened. It's, where does Miura even come up with this stuff? That reveal hit like a brick. Everything just stops. Nobody can breathe for a second. All of the fighting freezes, and then we see this majestic, almost unreal figure of Griffith appear. And out of nowhere, Zod shows up and immediately pledges his loyalty, helping whisk Griffith away. That whole sequence was one of the most wild, crazy endings that I've ever read, and it perfectly caps off the Conviction arc. I have no idea where the story is going to be going from here, but watching all of the characters that we've been following this whole time come together and witness this epic moment, absolute peak. I'm honestly kind of disappointed in myself for not liking the Conviction arc sooner. That final reveal was straight up amazing. But here's what keeps pulling me out of the moment, and it still keeps bugging me. Because Guts doesn't take a ride with the Skeleton Knight. Plotline number 3 that wouldn't have been fulfilled. If Guts had shown up just a few minutes earlier, he could have taken Casca away before anything went down. And that means that their son never would have been there for the egg of the perfect world to consume him, and Griffith never never would have been able to use the kid as a vessel to come back as a human. None of this would have happened. It really just makes that little joke from the last video bug me so much. Oh, you should have just hitched a ride with the Skeleton Knight. I know the Mock Eclipse event probably would have happened no matter what because of causality and all of that, but I still can't wrap my mind around how the story could have played out if Guts had gotten there even just a couple minutes sooner at the start of this volume. Instead, we get Nina, this selfish, awful character that I can't stand, taking Casca away purely for her own survival, and because of her, the entire Mock Eclipse goes off, Griffith comes back to the material world, and who knows what kind of horrors he's about to unleash. All of that because of her. Good riddance. I seriously do not want to see her again. And to wrap all of this up, we can see that both Farnese and Serpico are now on a mission to join Guts. I really hope they actually end up becoming a part of his crew in some way, because I think they could have a big role to play moving forward. It would honestly be so refreshing to see them fight alongside Guts on the battlefield in the future. We only got just a brief taste of it at the climax of the Conviction arc, but if we got to see more of that dynamic going forward, it'd be amazing. That's all I'm saying. And I also kind of want to see how the relationship would develop with Guts moving forward. Yeesh, that was a lot to cover, but it's not my fault. This arc just had so much to cover. It was giving me too much content. Quick question, am I alone in my sentiment of hating Nina so much? I'm still just so irritated by her, and I can't even believe that she gets a happy send-off. There were so many amazing characters in this show that meet some of the cruelest and most brutal ends that I'm like, why Nina? Why does it have to be her? She caused so much pain and misery, and I'm pretty confident that the whole next arc is gonna be a consequence of her stupidity. I need to calm myself down. That's everything that I have for y'all today, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video where we jump into the Millennium Falcon arc. Is it Millennium Falcon or Falcon of the Millennium arc? Because I've seen both translations, and I can't get over Star Wars and it being called the Millennium Falcon. It's just, there's too much going on in my brain, so you guys let me know what I should be pronouncing it as. You still here?